Good afternoon. Well, when you try to find the definition of diplomacy, the most common definition is diplomacy is the art of sending someone to hell in a way that makes him ask for directions. That's, well, common and obvious, and why we at the Abba Institute are trying to innovate in diplomacy into the unexpected place, into what we call innovative diplomacy, which is also a buzzword that many are using, but we try to actually execute, and this is why we refer ourselves as a do tank. Why do I mean? In that particular case, we are leveraging an action-oriented research method in order to prevent the next war with Lebanon. Well, sounds interesting. How do you do it? I'll give you a sneak peek in a second. But essentially, we start with the goal, then go to research. And by research, we mean not just an academic regular research, by research that is involving business tools from the business sector and tools from the highly investigative technological tools. I'll give you an example. Meet Hezbollah. What you know about this organization is that it's a terrorist organization, most sophisticated one. I would refer it as an octopus with many arms all connected through the head. In Lebanon, it's a social welfare movement. It's a political party. It's also a terrorist organization. It's also a militia, larger and more powerful than the Lebanese armed forces. And in Europe, which I'm sure many of you know, it's not fully designated as a terror organization. Only its military arm is designated as a terrorist organization, while its political arm can operate freely, quite freely in Europe. What we are not aware of is that this organization operates in Europe, on EU soil, damaging European citizens and causing damage and instability, not just in the Middle East, but also in Europe. What I'm about to present you is a result of a 16-month research that we have conducted on the organization and its destabilizing influence in Europe, trying to give a picture to the European citizens and to European decision makers on things that they are not necessarily know. The thing that I will present here was never presented before in such a structured way, and you guys will be the first to see it. Afterwards, I will tell you what we are going to do with it. So meet Hassan Trabulsi. Hassan Trabulsi is the Lebanese original business person, actually lives in Düsseldorf, German one. He runs a legitimate business of import-export, but in a recent operation of the DEA and the European authorities, they found out that in addition to his operation as a businessman, he also manages an operation of money laundering from drug trafficking money. Mr. Trabulsi reports to a guy called Muhammad Nuruddin, above him on the chart. Also a businessman, allegedly legitimate business person, but not quite. Also involved in money laundering, also was arrested. You go forward with that flow chart, and you go to the connection, interesting connection, to a guy called Abdallah Safi Adin. Many difficult and complicated names, but in essence, this guy is really interesting. Abdallah Safi Adin, Hezbollah's envoy to Tehran, and the liaison to the Revolutionary Guard, a terrorist designated by the United States a few months ago. He, by the way, or not by the way, especially reports to Hassan Nasrallah, the head of the organization. Now, what you see in a very specific and isolated case is the connection between Mr. Trabulsi at the bottom, to Muhammad Nuruddin, to Abdallah Safi Adin, to Nasrallah. Shows that there is no real distinction between the arms, the political and the military arm. Hezbollah itself does not treat the organization with two arms, but the European Union does. And what's interesting to see is that it's not the only case. There are many other cases exactly like that, where Abdallah Safi Adin and others are functioning as focal connection points between the wings of this organization. Essentially, as I said, an octopus. Well, you say, very impressive, Mr. Cohen. That looks interesting, but the Europeans probably know about it, and they are not designating for justified reason. And for that, I would say, not really and probably not. Most of the European countries and the EU included do not have that information because of due to lack of coordination between the drugs enforcement authorities and the terror prevention authorities. This lack of coordination does not give them the ability to see the entire picture as I just showed you. Second, and more interesting, is that most of the reason for which the organization was not fully designated back in the past, in 2013, are no longer relevant today. Hezbollah already commits terror activities and terror criminal activity in Europe, is no longer function as the main focal point to the Lebanese government, and very important, does not function as a stabilizing factor in the Middle East. So it should be designated. What we are going to do with that? We're going to the action part. What I've just presented you is a part of a larger documentary that we have produced that will be presented next week, 7 days from today, at the German Bundestag, to decision makers. We will also publish the results, or the detailed result of our research, try to promote a resolution and decisions designating the organization as a terror organization as a whole. Why? Because the terror organization that cannot operate freely in Europe is a weaker organization, and a weaker organization is an organization that dares less. Hence, would not open a strike against Israel. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what we are calling innovative diplomacy, trying to find the focal point in which you can influence, research, and go forward to the action. In that way, we're trying to act or reshape diplomacy in the 21st century and make it a bit more innovative and far, far more effective. Thank you.